G20 in South Africa, a controversy has now erupted at the handover of the G20 presidency. Remember, US is supposed to be taking the presidency next year, and South Africa has refused to hand over presidency to a junior US official who is currently representing the United States, saying the handover will take place at an equal.
I now say that this gavel of this G20 Summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed. It cannot be that a country's geographical location or income level or army determines who has a voice and who is spoken down to. And it basically means that there should be no bullying of one nation by another nation. We are all equal.
Imagine waking up one morning to discover that your country is no longer welcome at the world's most powerful economic forum, and that foreign funding for hospitals, clinics, and schools could be cut off overnight. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is the reality now confronting South Africa. The United States, under Donald Trump, has announced that South Africa will not be invited to the 2026 G20 Summit in Miami. He cites Pretoria's handling of so-called white farmer rights abuses and a symbolic refusal to hand over the G20 presidency baton to a US embassy official as justification for these drastic measures. But South Africa's leaders are calling this misinformation, highlighting a growing diplomatic rift. Today on Mzansi PoliScope, we break down this unfolding story and explore what it means for South Africans on the ground, the G20, and international relations. In late November 2025, Donald Trump announced through his social media channels that the United States would not invite South Africa to the 2026 G20 Summit scheduled to take place in the Miami area at Trump National Doral. This decision, however, went beyond a mere diplomatic slight. Trump also declared that all US aid, payments, and subsidies to South Africa would be immediately suspended. According to Trump, the South African government refused to provide the traditional symbolic handover of the G20 presidency gavel to a US embassy official, citing protocol concerns. The former US president framed this refusal as a sign of disrespect, but he also reinforced his long-standing narrative that Afrikaner farmers in South Africa are under siege, claiming they face systematic human rights abuses and land expropriation.
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have I guess a G20 meeting there or something, but we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence and come here.
It cannot be that a country's geographical location or income level or army determines who has a voice and who is spoken down to. And it basically means that there should be no bullying of one nation by another nation.
Trump's language was severe, framing the situation as a moral obligation to intervene. Yet, according to Pretoria, these allegations are not only inaccurate, but dangerously misleading. The policy implications are vast. A U.S. aid freeze could jeopardize critical healthcare, education, and development programs across the country. South Africa's government quickly rejected Trump's accusations, describing them as misinformation and distortions. President Cyril Ramaphosa, along with key government officials, emphasized that the claims of white genocide are baseless and politically motivated. On the issue of land reform, South Africa has enacted legislation intended to correct historic inequalities stemming from apartheid, but government leaders stress that this does not permit arbitrary confiscation of property and is not targeted against any racial group. Even domestic critics of the land expropriation policies have acknowledged that the narrative of mass persecution of white farmers is largely unfounded. Regarding the symbolic gavel handover at the G20 Summit, Pretoria explained that the decision followed established diplomatic protocol. The baton was handed over to the next G20 chair at the National Foreign Affairs Department rather than directly at the summit venue, because the U.S. sent a lower-ranking chargé d'affaires rather than a senior diplomat. Despite Trump's claims, South Africa remains a recognized founding member of the G20, and its status cannot be revoked unilaterally by one country. This response underscores both the legitimacy of South Africa's G20 participation and the broader context of international diplomacy, where procedure and protocol are often misunderstood or intentionally misrepresented for political gain. While the debate unfolds at the highest levels of politics, the real impact will be felt by ordinary South Africans. U.S. funding plays a significant role in supporting programs in healthcare, social development, HIV and AIDS treatment, and local education. This sudden withdrawal of resources could disrupt rural clinics, feeding schemes, and community projects, leaving thousands vulnerable. Imagine a small clinic in Limpopo or KwaZulu-Natal relying on foreign-supplied medicines and essential equipment suddenly facing shortages. Or think of local NGOs providing food, school support, and basic infrastructure in underprivileged townships, now uncertain about funding continuity. What emerges is a stark reality. High-level diplomatic disputes, framed around race, land, and political protocol, often affect those least responsible for the disagreement. The very communities that the international community claims to support are ironically the ones most exposed to the fallout. These are people living on the margins, grappling with unemployment, inequality, and historical injustices, yet they bear the brunt of political maneuvering thousands of kilometers away. This incident goes beyond South Africa and the United States. It reflects larger global tensions about power, race, and diplomacy. At its core, it highlights the ongoing struggle to reconcile historic inequities with modern justice initiatives, especially in post-colonial countries. It exposes how minority rights, in this case claims of widespread abuse against Afrikaner farmers, can be weaponized for geopolitical leverage. It also serves as a reminder of the imbalance in global power dynamics. When aid is tied to compliance or political gestures, ordinary citizens, not policymakers, often pay the price. For South Africa, the move risks isolating the country at a critical moment, when its voice on the global stage, in forums like the G20, is essential for African representation and leadership in world affairs. More broadly, this controversy raises questions about how much influence superpowers should exert over the internal affairs of sovereign nations, and whether punitive measures like aid cuts are an ethical or effective tool for diplomacy. Looking ahead, several potential scenarios could unfold. South Africa may receive support from other G20 members or global partners, with some countries possibly pushing back against unilateral U.S. actions. Pretoria could seek alternative alliances with nations less aligned with U.S. policy, such as China, Russia, or emerging economies in the global south. Domestically, the government may face pressure to either accelerate or moderate its land reform policies, depending on how international and domestic funding streams are affected. Most importantly, civil society and ordinary citizens may need to find resilience and local solutions to offset gaps created by the US aid freeze. This situation highlights the interconnection between global politics and local livelihoods, where policy decisions made in Washington, D.C. can reverberate in small communities across South Africa, affecting health, education, and basic survival. So what do you think? Is this truly about protecting human rights, as Trump claims? Or is it a form of political punishment disguised as moral outrage? The reality is that the people most affected are not politicians or large landowners, but ordinary South Africans trying to live their daily lives. This is a clear reminder that global diplomacy has human consequences, and the stakes are always highest for the most vulnerable. We must ask ourselves, when global power meets local suffering, who truly pays the price?